gone too far. So that's my name, that's the spelling. It is the most unusual thing about me, you'll be pleased to hear. There is a small change in naming going on here, and this is a sales enablement challenge in that you'll see Paragon Customer Communications. We got acquired last month, so I had to learn new templates, pick up a new brand, do all the things, change all my bloody slides. It wasn't easy, but we got there in the end. I'm going to talk for the next few minutes. I'm aware I'm between you and coffee and we're about 10 minutes late, so I will get a move on in a second. I'm going to talk about how I've been using AI with clients in a consultative sales enablement role. And I won't talk about AI openly. It's not a technology discussion. It's a case study of how we've executed something for a client that has enabled them to be better at selling their product. But I think it's worth grounding where I am and who we are. And we've had various definitions of sales enablement today. I think this is the classical one. We have a customer journey that we're all familiar with, attraction and retain that marketing are responsible for, closure, deal making, customer relationships from sales. And we sit in the middle. The professionals amongst us here today are bridging that divide. I've got a foot in all these camps. I've grew up in marketing. I've run small businesses, so I've had to be responsible for sales. So I kind of fitted naturally into this role a couple of years ago when we developed the practice in our business. And I think that experience across the board, you'll hear from people come from different aspects of the world, whether they're more sales-led or marketing-led. But I think it's important to have a blended experience of what your skill set is when you come into this. And Boris, you talked about this very much this morning, I think. And I'm going to talk really about that nearer the sales end of the process. So I'll call it the last mile. You'll hear this in delivery and logistics and various other areas. We don't talk about it too much in sales, but it's that what happens as we get closer to the end of a client relationship, and how do we influence, using sales enablement, that relationship we have with customers and our sellers. And the typical things we hear when we get to that last mile is the disconnect between marketing and sales gets wider. So we've brought that horse, marketing have created the collateral, they've taken it to the water. And the kind of objections that they hear from the sales force and from customers to a degree are that content is now too generic. It's too vanilla for the whole thing. It's just not relevant for the opportunity I'm running. I've got to customize everything. And it's kind of valid objections on the whole. If anybody's from marketing here, put your hand up and deny it. But we all know we create things that are, they have to be for multiple markets. We can't create 1 million assets. We have to create X number of assets. So how do we get across that hurdle? Well, I think we can do it by using emerging technologies like AI. Now, it's not a panacea. We just heard about Einstein that's on Salesforce, and anybody who's worked with IBM will know their Watson capabilities. And these are big beast tools to fix some things. And I think you can take a few AI tools that are out in the market and on SaaS level products and bring them into your sales enablement stack very easily and make them very effective. The bits that AI affects mostly in my world are how we look at data. So in those areas, it would be the CRM interactions. It would be using tools like Einstein to profile customers and to bring out the right segments to make appeals to. So this is really about the kind of pre-sales approach. What are we going to do today? Who are we going to target? Who are we going to focus on? And we sit in that area. I won't talk about this too much today, but I think it's important to reference the data point. This isn't all about salespeople picking up opportunities by themselves. The second part is, if you like, not a technology skill, it's about using creativity. You want people still to retain flexibility in the process. You want them to be dynamic, and you want them not to just take things off a sales enablement platform and deliver them to a customer without thinking about how they change that message and how they personalize that message. That's a creative skill that kind of gets blunted to some degree by using big platform CRM and sales enablement, but I think it's a vital component. And I think it's a vital component because it helps us draw the two pieces together to build empathy within customer relationships. So instead of it all being about, we created a leaflet, we distributed it successfully, we had the right meetings with the customer, why didn't we sell? Again, back to sort of earlier references we've had today of, sales process was all great, the customer was horrible. It's because we're not building that end part of the process using the tool sets we have available. So empathy is always my objective when I'm talking to clients here. So the case study I'm going to talk to you about today, I have to anonymize it, unfortunately. I can't throw brand names around because I don't work for a big company who gets permission to do these things. So it's a global asset management company, billions and billions under management. They are one of the biggest. So they create products through their product marketing team, and this particular product was a discrete fund for retirement products that was underperforming. It was in Germany, where they targeted the fund. It was originally built in the UK, but shipped to Germany because the market was right for their conditions there. And obviously, given that type of product, it was a very regulated selling process. So I had compliance issues and all the other things to get across. And compliance people love AI. I don't know how to tell you that. The client didn't have a brief. They had a problem, which was, this fund is not selling. It's a sales problem. How do I get more people to buy this thing? Because we've created it. It's got all the money in it. We have to now get that money out into the marketplace and draw the funds in. And the only feedback they had directly was that there was a lack of emotional value within their proposition. Now, I didn't catch all of a presentation earlier, but somebody was talking about institutional selling at BlackRock. And that kind of fundamental problem of you have these products that can in themselves be quite dry. How do you get them across to customers when you've got compliance ring fencing you and marketing being very safe? You have to be able to kind of break the dullness of those products to make them valuable to a consumer in the first place. So we created this high-level proposition for our proposal, which is, well, we're going to create you a new and more emotional playbook for your sales opportunity. And again, in our proposal stage, you've seen various parts of our own sales process here. We said there's 3 things you need to fix. The first is you need to know who your customers are, because they couldn't tell us that. That was the first question we asked in the discovery. Do you know who you're selling to? No. The second part was, well, we're going to build you a playbook. That's the obvious, easy part, because that's kind of asset and content based. And then the third part was we're going to make it adaptable. It isn't going to be a static tool because your product is dynamic, but also the market conditions and fast-moving consumer behavior is going to dictate this. So we wanted to build in that third part to the piece. So taking the first part, defining your customers. Now, this was there, and this is a fairly typical, I think, financial services view of the customer base. So we have a product management team creating compelling products. It's been traditionally successful in the marketplace. You don't get to be a multi-billion-pound fund management company without being successful at designing products. So they had a real kind of cliched view of their middle market. They didn't sell directly. They dealt through intermediary sellers, IFAs, insurance companies. And it's all this kind of glory of holding hands through a blissful future together. And that cliche went into their customer base. They just imagined, 60-year-old men who were exceptionally fit and ripped for their age, and women who were 59 but looked 29 because that's what their marketing budgets had available to them. And it just wasn't a realistic proposition about who was their customer. So the first thing was they didn't know that they were actually selling to the finance advisors. They knew they weren't selling to the consumers because they didn't know consumer marketing, but they never identified their internal marketplace, their first customer, if you like, as a B2B customer. So that was a revelation, believe it or not, to them. The second was that they didn't realize necessarily that the IFAs were selling to consumers and there was a B2C relationship. So of course the logical step, we join those two up as we use that lovely phrase B2B2C. And in fact, I guess from my role in this, I'm B2B2B2C. I add an extra layer into that, but we're not here to talk about me. But that cliche is, I think, pervasive, and you have to kind of debug that. How do you make sales processes effective? How do you make sales enablement work? Well, you make it by breaking things that aren't working, and this clearly wasn't working. So who is the customer? So this is the B2B customer, and we use devices from the creative side of our tool set like persona developments. This is the persona of a seller, an IFA in Germany. Demet is a real person. You can search the internet, LinkedIn, Zoom, all those places, and you can find Demet, who works for, I can't remember the exact name of the bank now, but she's a financial consultant for one of the German intermediary insurance sellers working with private clients. That's a title on LinkedIn. But knowing who she is means nothing, because there are 20,000 people like Demet who work in Germany as IFAs. So we had to give Demet some richness of personality. And because there are people like her and other colleagues across the spectrum who will have the same job titles, they aren't all the same. We're all here today. We're all different, as Life of Brian used to say. So we used AI. This is the first part of the AI magic we used in the piece, to layer a personality onto Demet. And it wasn't an artificial personality. This is a process akin to using Watson or whatever to read about Demet and infer from Demet's written record on the internet what kind of person she is. So it tells us that she is warm, cooperative, and diplomatic. Great selling skills, I'd imagine. It tells us that she needs to be collaborative, and it gives us a load of traits, and I've just picked out a few for the purposes of the sales process, but she likes to connect deeply. She likes to share customer stories. She may lose objectivity, becoming friendly and involved. These are kind of pluses and minuses on the sales journey. So we can give her all the playbook stuff we like, but when she sits in front of a customer, she behaves as her personality tells us she'll behave, not as we as sales professionals, managers, ops people back at base would like her to do. So We did. We initially found a dozen different types of people across the spectrum, and we profiled them in different ways because we wanted to represent people from different segments of the personality wheel, if you like. So using different methodologies, you can, the crudest versions run to about 16 personality types. The more nuanced will go to an infinite number, but we needed a few samples for our first test piece. So we had this data for Demet. And then we also needed to understand who the B2C customer was. So B2C customers are a little bit trickier when you're on a first-off project with a new client to try and convince them to buy loads of consumer data in Germany, which has lovely privacy laws, et cetera, et cetera. So we did this on a much more inferred classical marketing basis. So we had some data points from the type of relationship that that consumer would have with an individual seller organization. So, you'd know things if they bought their insurance policy or ran their pensions through you, that they would have savings and mortgages and all sorts of stuff. So the first two columns are really a kind of factual, data-driven view on who the customer. But we created these personas which were much more inferred. So what would, I can look around the room and see sort of 3, 4, 5 people who are probably the same age range, same socioeconomic groups as me, but we wouldn't share everything. Our philosophy on what our investment and risk profile would be like might be different. Our motivations for investment, say how much tax we want to pay, do we want to go offshore, all of these things would influence our relationship with a potential selling organization. So we created this kind of more emotional pastiche view on what a customer might be. And again, we took this wide. We said I think in the segment they were targeting, there was 7 million people in Germany who fitted this target, so it was too wide a view. So we just created a few personas as a library starter for them to enable them to at least imagine what their product proposition was appealing to. Is it something that a customer would buy, a customer type would buy? And from knowing a little bit about who the seller was and knowing a little bit about who the buyer was, we were able to create these bridges between the two. So what would a particular type of seller like to know about a particular type of buyer, and how would that influence their sales conversation? So bear in mind, this is still in a compliant framework. So we're not making things up, we're not mis-selling, we're not stretching the rules about sales behavior. We're trying to enable the salesperson to have a deeper and more meaningful relationship with the customer. So that's the theory, all well good. At this point, the client agrees to commission the project, run forward. A colleague of mine who was on the WebEx when we pitched this said that when we did the AI profiles of the sellers, that there were gasps from the Germans, which is kind of as good as you get, I guess. You need no Germans in the crowd I'm offending, I hope. But we still had challenges within the actual execution of the project. So the first is that these are more sellers, and if I had an infinite screen, it would be 20,000 feet wide with different pictures on it of all the people working as IFAs. We have an infinite or almost infinite number of 5, 6, 7 million buyers in the marketplace. And we have chaos about how any individual seller might meet any individual buyer on a day. If you're in Stuttgart and a customer's in Stuttgart, you're more likely to meet them. If you're working mornings or afternoons, you're more likely to meet a housewife or a businessman. All these conditions are just so arbitrary in our CRMs. We don't necessarily target and build relationships between, particularly in the B2C side, how consumers meet the right salespeople. It tends to be just opportunistic. So we still had spaghetti junction soup, and you can imagine the chaos that would look like on a very big drawing. But we were able to zone in on each individual and say, well, actually, because we know customer types and because we know the type of the salesperson, we're able to actually pick out parts of our sales message that are more relevant to those customer types. And what's more, we're able to help Demet, in this case, be able to tailor her sales pitch without breaking any rules to each individual customer type, so she can more easily find the type of approach she wants to make. And that essentially leads to conversational sales. Instead of it, we talked about consultative selling earlier, but this is really starting to get down to, I'm sitting in your lounge, I'm having a cup of tea, we're talking about your investment portfolio, and I'm having a normal conversation with you about marketing, about very sophisticated products. How did it all come out in the end? Well, we had to build the physical thing to be able to take this to market and test it. It had 4 components. The first was that we had a kind of self-discovery tool because we couldn't profile every of the 20,000 people, as I said. We just didn't have the data access to do that, but we gave them some guides. So I can click some boxes and essentially say, well, I know my weakness is that I'm a little bit too soft, or X or Y, or my strengths are this, so I can play to my strengths. So that kind of self-discovery was an important part of the training process for people who, bear in mind, don't work for this fund management company. The second part was then we gave them the match-up access to what type of customer we're going to meet next. So if I'm going to meet you later or you later, you're different. I can kind of get my head around who I'm going to pitch to a little bit better and get my pre-sales work done, if you like. That translated then into the type of language we used to describe the benefits of the program. So there were 4 key benefits for this project, this product. And obviously, if I'm talking to someone who's very risk averse, the benefits are still the benefits. They haven't gone away because they're kind of attributes of the physical product. But how I might express them, or how I might, we had the finger waving exercise about perspective. That's entirely what this is. This is coming at the content from just the right way. And lastly, we had some very functional product detail to get through, because it's a dynamic financial product. It changes its price and its performance daily. So depending on the day of the week you might walk out of this, we needed to be able to build in that flexibility later. It led to more creativity. We ended up having to write hundreds of snippets of content. So just to give you a flavor of it, we had those very dry product marketing level, flexible investment, high liquidity, capital, blah, blah, blah. Salespeople were previously going out and talking to household customers with that language and those terms. It just wasn't working. So we turned them into plain English, general benefit statements. We said, well, what would you talk to someone like your mother about? And we just got plain language on them. And then for each of the IFA personality types and for each of the customer personality types, we spun that text around. How does it sound? And I think there's 1 or 2 that might sound very similar. A word changed here, or a he to she type change in the language. But mostly, each piece of content was written from scratch. You imagine you're the salesperson. You imagine you're talking to the customer. What would you say? And that was. It looks like, this is only the top of the spreadsheet that we handed over to the translation bureau. This goes on and on. It actually took about a day to write. It was surprisingly easy to do once you kind of got yourself in mode as today I am a 30-year-old Turkish immigrant in Germany selling financial products. It's a lovely, lovely experience, I can tell you. The physical prototype, if you like, for testing this in the marketplace was, if I told a salesperson I was giving them a 200-page slide deck to go out and talk to customers about, they go, oh, not for me at all. The experiential reality of using this is you'd work with about 10, 12 slides, because you'd navigate through. It was all built with animation, everything else, very compact delivery. We made sure it optimized so it could be emailed around easily and accessed through systems like Seismic or Showpad or whatever. But there's a lot of pattern repetition you can see there in the piece, and that's because the content is broadly similar. It's just the actual text phrase that we had in the spreadsheet is translated for a different person here. And the format, of course, is completely unwieldy for the longer-term goal of adaptability, because PowerPoint being PowerPoint, it'll just die on its feet in 3 days. So we have already planned the next stages. I'll come onto those in a couple of minutes. But that was the build. It went out to test. I'm looking at my watch with no date to tell you how presentation mode works. But it went out to test in the marketplace in September. The first reactions from the intermediaries, the B2B people, was that they have never seen anything like this in their sales kits from financial services. It's just normally, here's our stats, or where you go and sell it. So the idea of giving them a tool that could help them coach the salespeople about this specific product, that informed them about their customers, this layering of sales information was very valuable to them. And the initial reaction from the salespeople within those organizations is also very positive. Self-discovery, make it easier for me to sell. All the attributes of sales enablement are sitting there. It'll take us 2 years to get verifiable performance data. That's how long it'll take to sign people up, transfer their savings into investments, and see if it's better than the market average. But it's heading that way. And as I say, we've already planned the next steps for this. So this is a generic description of how we might apply change to this piece. But there are 3 areas that we're really going to focus on improving with this deck over time. So the first is that while we've used AI to build some of the initial core personas for the salespeople, we want to make that dynamic. And we also want to make it personalized and live. So we used, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Crystal Nose. I think Salesforce have invested in it, but it's kind of an add-on tool where you can process personalities, either in LinkedIn or in Gmail or wherever or whatever. But we would like each salesperson of the 20,000 in this market to be able to get their own personality reports quickly and dynamically. It's just, click my LinkedIn connection and it tells me who I am and what my strengths and weaknesses are. The second part of it is that we also want to use that same, or not the same, but we'll probably use something more like IBM Watson to develop consumer profiles. Now, it's very hard to gather consumer data, but you can catch it in traffic. We can put plugins on websites, and we can join a lot of data up. We'll hear from other product vendors about where they're working on making a better single view of the customer activity, if you like. But we want to go beyond just the layering of collecting some data points for a customer and actually make the customer's, if you like, intentions much clearer from the things they've looked at. So it wasn't that I looked at a car, then a pair of shoes, then something else. It's like we can infer certain attributes about somebody's behavior from all of their social behaviors and all of their web behaviors. We then move on to saying, well, now we've got 20,000 sellers who need personalized content because it has to match up to their delivery style. And we have millions of customers who, to go back to our earlier days pieces, we have Charlotte was showing the first Instagram picture was a puppy. That'll motivate some people. That's the kind of thing that might make me invest if I'm of a certain disposition. I'm a rugby player too. I'm Irish. We never have any winning trophies of the World Cup going up, but there are different types of imagery and different language and different simple things like color schemes. I like bright colors. So if I was seeing sales collateral that was bright, it might motivate me to sell more. And because you're not changing the underlying message within that, again, compliance love you. Who cares what the color is as long as the sales come in rolling over the top of the hill? Then the most important part, and I think the most exciting part, and sadly the furthest away part, is you remember my spaghetti diagram with sellers and buyers all locked up in some horrible mess of a relationship. I think we need a kind of a Tinder for this relationship. We need to be able to move on and match the right personality of seller with the right personality of customer. And I think that's further away because of the challenges of data and personality and everything else. And we haven't been great at expressing why AI is a good thing to consumers on the whole. And everybody's getting a bit worried about privacy of data, which is all valid. But even if you could move on 10% of your activities, this closer relationship between customer and seller, I think you'll see massive dividends. It'll blitz what we're doing in other areas of content development and faster delivery. We talk about, we've saved 30% because we can download assets quicker. I think you'll just see 30% revenue go up because you've matched the right buyer to the right seller in the right conditions and given them the right content to deliver. So I think that really is where the future of this is going to move to. And we'll see more convergence from people like IBM and the bigger players where they're going to introduce tools on their marketing clouds which will allow us to do more of this. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Super interesting and super scary, I must admit. So, do you see a future where a sales bot will be able to sell better than a physical person, knowing the personal characteristics of the buyer?
I mean, science fiction, yes. Reality, never. Probably because until we get to a point where computers are, passing Turing tests and all sorts of stuff and creating the right emotional conditions and being able to convince people that they are not robots, then how's that going to happen? I mean, I had 3 bubbles up early on, which were data, creativity, and empathy, and we know that we can use computers and AI to plow through data and give us really niche snapshots and get things out very quickly to us. The use of AI and creativity is increasing. There are tools like a company called DataSign, have a product called Pomegranate. That's kind of an assistant, marketing assistant, help you write more relevant AI-generated marketing content effectively. It'll kind of coach you to become a better writer. But these are all very early steps. And while each of those individual applications and platforms might give you a 5% or a 10% gain here or there, I don't think it'll change the dynamic of me sitting across the table from you and you trusting me that I'm selling you the right thing because you can look into my eyes and all the other conditions of a personal sales situation. There'll obviously be products where you can accelerate the sale, where it's less emotional investment required from the consumer. But if you're asking somebody to take 50,000 euros out of their savings and give it to your investment fund, I think that's a personal, always will be a personal sale. Thank you. Yeah.
Just to add to that, Crystal Knows. I used to work at Salesforce for nearly 8 years, and I did use Crystal Knows.
Yeah.
And it's just an amazing tool, and it's literally it's recommended you have to write an email. So I tried to write an email to our country leader. I was like, keep it short. He likes this. You have to do this. I was like, wow. And I even started myself, and that was the scariest part.
Yeah, I
It's a
mean,
great tool.
that layering of kind of how much do you trust it. My UK MD 2 years ago, when the first presentation I ever did of sales enablement to our organisation was at a sales event, as you do. Everybody gets together in Birmingham for 2 days. And we were doing the dry run the day before, and he came down and said, "You can't do your presentation." I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because you don't have permission from the people you are using personas of tomorrow based on Crystal." I said, "Well, they've all got employment contracts. They've signed away every bloody right in the world. I can use their public data surely for this." And of course, he was managing director, so he kept on saying no. So we had a conversation about an hour later in his office, and he produced his paper out of his bag, 20-page personality report, because he'd just been through some executive group thing where they'd taken him away for 4 days and done some analysis. And he went, "The thing that frightens me most is that this cost X, and that $49 for Crystal Knows per person or something." And he said, "Crystal knows as much as this does about me, and how does it do it?" And I said, "Well, it's just reading your LinkedIn profile and any email interaction I might have had with you. But actually, it's running on a sliver of data that thin." I find it incredible. It is magic, but I also don't trust it 100%. And pretty much that goes for anything with AI. We don't have a big enough sales force, but I would use something like, say, Gong, which is another AI platform, and I know Seismic has some of the call analysis built into it. You've got to be able to interpret beyond the technology, and AI by itself isn't ready to be released to customers yet, if you like, or to the sales force yet. But with the sales enablement team, with the right kind of data teams, I absolutely think you should be experimenting with these tools to look at how it can accelerate what you're doing. Thanks. Anybody else? Yeah.
So when you came up with the profile,
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
when you came up with the profile,
Yeah.
did you go through a process of testing that?
Well, the testing is effectively what's happening now with the client in market, but the profiles for the salespeople, there's kind of almost no way to validate them. It's a machine reading language and saying that, for example, if you use positive words, it'll assume you're a positive person. It's a fairly kind of natural language inference to make. But for the bits that were entirely based on the AI interpretation, obviously I showed you a lot of data there. We didn't use all that data within the tool we then built to go out later on. For the consumers, the lack of data is the real problem. And I think it will be a problem for using AI in consumer marketing for a while, because it'll require people in classical marketing roles to build personas and to almost like say, well, we can't have every 55-year-old woman being described as a cat lover or something cliched. We have to move on from that segmentation of customers to having something that's behavioral, and also sociological, if you like. I mean, the 52-48 for a UKIP vote, when you have people who live next door to me on each side could vote either way. It just doesn't. We have all the data points the same. So what makes our social viewpoint different? And I think that kind of difference between how people behave inflects itself into why people don't buy our products sometimes. We wonder where our failure is. It is with the customer, but it's not for the reasons you probably think it is.
I suppose my question is, when you're implanting a type of AI program into it, particularly for the customer,
Yeah.
I guess you're going to at some point have to be able to justify some level of return, etc. So are there any kind of early tests around the AI that gave you a level of confidence that you could go back to that client and go, do you know what, yes, there are some complex calculations happening here, but here are some indicators that it's going in the right direction?
Yeah, I think because my first pitch was to sell to my client. So when they went, wow, that was a pretty good indication that we'd hit something. If I was pitching some straight creative work and they said, wow, I'd be pretty happy that it was, the pictures were nice and the typography and the copywriting was good. So we took those early indicators as we were onto something. And then when they took the built deck into their clients and started showing them. So again, being a product marketer, my client walked into, if you like, his peers in these IFA organizations, with Allianz Bank or Allianz Insurance or whatever. So he was dealing with sort of sales managers at his level, not with the salespeople, but the positive reaction he had as well, that we haven't seen anything like this. This is really good. You kind of, at the moment we're rolling on opinion rather than fact. I don't think we'll get the data behind that for 2 years. I'm currently working with another client in the automotive sector on looking at how their dealers might behave using this kind of similar approach. That would be a much more direct thing. You want to buy a car, you want to buy it in the next 4 weeks. We'll be able to track you as you come through the dealer website and the consumer website. We'll know your predisposition, if you like, and then we'll quickly move on to almost directing you to the right dealership based on your personality. Yeah. Thanks. Good. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
All right, guys. I guess we're on break until 4 o'clock, and then we have a panel.